Well, fantastic. I write a wide range of things, but I knew from early on in my silly life that I was going to be a person who shared my thoughts, my writing, and it was always my fondest hope that what I wanted to share was useful to my friends. And my goal as a writer is to have people think and laugh at the same time. So I'm going to share screen so that you can read along with the nonsense. Let's see here. Share. Okay. Boom. And here we go. Because I write a lot of very serious stuff with my tongue planted firmly in my cheek, from time to time, friends chide me and say, Rick, geez, you stay away from the serious stuff. Just you try some lighter things. So I'm going to share some lighter things as well as a sprinkling of some of my political work. This first piece is an attempt. Florida, where I lived for almost 50 years, has a well-deserved reputation for being a corner of madness. It puts our friends on the West Coast, who are often thought to be a little hippy-dippy, to shame. Florida has its own peculiar brand of insanity, and when you hear a story start off, a person in Florida, you know that it's going to go someplace weird. So I thought, having lived there as long as I did, I would share some Florida fables with you. So this is called Five Fragrant Florida Fables. A man carves a trailer park from a single palm tree. Billy Harkness had a passion, and though he admitted it was dreadfully, woefully out of fashion, he'd spent a dozen years or more carving from a single palm tree's softwood core a miniature trailer park for all to see, with their little picket fences, chase lounges, and color TVs. He had to carve under a microscope late at night, and all the day he never listened to the voices who murmured nay. He carved his people fat and thin. He even put their little dogs and kitties in, their little lawns, their tiny trees, even a few with scraped up knees, their sprinklers and security gates, one stacked up high with old fruit crates, their sunburned noses and sunglasses too, wearing sandals, flip-flops, and some who, driving golf carts, drove right on through. Part two, a man collects samples of pills from every party drug used in the 60s and 70s. He collected reds, he collected ludes, he selected all the ones that people used. He got acid, he got speed, he even found the ones that made you bleed. He found the round ones and the ovals, found a few that created neural novas. He selected pink ones, blue and greenies, even ones that looked vaguely obscene. Paper, acid, and window pane, ones that helped you cope with rain, jellied ones to help you dream, some to cure you off nicotine, some to chew and some to swallow, some you'd be better off if they were hollow, shiny black ones to keep you up some, after which you've taken you should never drive a truck, ones to chill you out already, ones after which taken you won't walk steady, just loll and pitch his drug menagerie, his great collection besides. He made some great connections. And then this one, still part of the Florida Fables. A man trained a clutch of baby alligators to play Anagata Davida on the bells. Fresh from their eggs, these baby gators were, were introduced to tiny twinkling bells hung from taters. They get their cue from bits of food dangled there beneath their snood. Sometimes fish and sometimes froggies. After these last ones, it seems they were rendered groggy. They just responded to Iron Butterfly. I don't understand, but watch them fly. They jump on their two hind feet and ring their bells. God knows why. Anagata Davida seems to stir a little something down in their middle. If they could only play the fiddle. Watch these little critters leap and snap. They learned Anagata Davida before their nap. From the organ sound, they use their feet. An Emily organ, and now it's all complete. And then this one, marching kittens on parade. She lined them up one summer day, tail to nose, expecting, even urging them to tend to wander and play. This clutch of kittens like to march, their movements circumscribed like they've been dipped in starch. One by one, they parade on by. They're expected at the Macy's parade in July, or maybe Thanksgiving. I'm up in the air. But if they climb up on those balloons, they'll need some stairs. Watch them. They're shooting. Nothing's tooting up in the sky in a blink of an eye on a zooming balloon. It's in the final clause exactly why. And then this one, the final of this sequence, it's called A Man Marries Each One of a Family's 7 Daughters in Age Sequence. He met Melissa. It was May. He proposed marriage that very day, but it wasn't long before he met June. And oh, by gosh, in his heart, he'd found more room. He told Melissa that he'd met June, Melissa's older sister, who could always be counted on to carry a merry tune. And now, in his heart, he found room for June. This upset Melissa. She was not gay. That was her cousin, who could never even seem to stay. So Melissa dismissed this loving guy. Just ask the lovely June what she's about it. She knows why, and there's no doubt. No sooner had he changed his nest, he met another sister by the name of Bess. He wooed her, he sought her, and by goodness adopted her deep in his heart, or just for a while, that's what he thought. He decided, unrequited, that she was the best of all the daughters in that family's nest. June came through the front door and didn't dally, but that's exactly when he met the older sister, Sally. Sally came in arm in arm with little June. She decided to move into the upstairs room. No sooner had she loitered in, she and Bobby came within. My friend, Sally stood in June's wedding party, and surprisingly soon she laid down with Bobby. A familiar tune for this well-groomed fellow. June was okay with her sister staying, despite knowing she was regularly with her husband laying. But the last straw was broke with Sister Carla, who traveled widely by barge and by boat. She traveled fa la la and by bus and electric car, so when the youngest sister Monique joined the fun, that was it. Old June was done. She could never with her sister party there atop her husband. She was far too haughty. The sisters all found Bobby a people pleaser, though perhaps a little naughty, him the youngest geezer. So that's the 5 Florida fables. So, Don, I will aver to your wisdom, sir. Should I do another one, or that 5 will suffice for our opening salvo?
Well, I mean, it's really up to you. If you want to give people a chance to make comments in between, you may, or they can wait until
Please,
the end.
please. Any reactions to that?
You got some hearts going on.
I,
I don't know if you
I,
could see that or not, but
Was
yeah, some
you know,
hilarious,
floating
Rick. I
hearts.
always
There's
love to
one.
listen to.
thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I thought I would take this idea of Florida's strangeness and really kind of shake out some of the strange things that may possibly be going on. Now, this one, I will warn you, for those of you who are easily shocked, this it could be perceived as involving bestiality. It may be a little on the blue side, but then again, sometimes that's what we do. This is called the bee's knees. Pretty as you please. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but you've got 6 to admire. That's a wonder there. Yes, sirree. Not just delicate, lovely, and shiny. Right there above them, that velvety little hiney. Made for scurrying from pedal to pedal, blessed by more curves than a comic book heavy metal. Now, I'm not just talking about a bouncing bee behind, not any kind of average of behind's a behind. But these bees' knees, if you please, I'm positively anti-allergenic, if you know what I mean, because driving all that shaking, guiding that heady dance is a beautiful mind that came from study and spirit, not by chance. Bees' knees. Now, having covered some wide terrain, I'm going to go back into the political universe for my next one. This is called Meet Me at the Plaza in Gaza. Meet me at the poolside bar. It's not too far. At the plaza in Gaza, it's all very nice. We stayed there twice. There's a charming little casino. It reminds me a lot of Rio, where when you ask for a shot, believe it or not, the drink is served from a pitcher forged from a converted cartridge belt. It's all very chic and very svelte. The modest models there, fashion can't compare. Their clothing made in a motif displayed. It's a Kevlar bikini with a flak jacket stole. It's just how they roll. But you got to watch out at the beach because the lifeguards compete as sharpshooters replete. So make sure you bring your towel from the tower because after an hour on the sand, they might mistake your dark tan for some kind of commando. They may not understand, though you're one of the guests, so well you can guess the rest. And until you've confessed in a state of undress, your testimony under duress and even a stress position, which we know isn't torture, can damage the furniture and mar your stay at the Holiday in Gaza. It's never complete until from your seat in the theater where you get to hear the children's chorus, where they implore us for food. I'm told it's not rude to leave them starve right there out in the yard. But at the poolside cabana, there's not even a banana. You got to understand what they've done with the place. The rubble's gone now, replaced with a five-star cafe with starving starlets galore. There's so much fashion and more. Fascist fashion galore. Hardly any, well, not so much gore. The casino's complete, and while there's still an occasional bombing, let me point out instead that lovely Givenchy awning it's above your head. Time on the shooting range is still mandatory at this stage. For every looter that you're the shooter, you can claim a stack of chips. So go ahead, hey, let her rip. and then not wanting to leave the Middle East, the only one approached. Then I got this one called "Making Greenland Grape Again." Returning to it again like a long lost cousin or even friend, we brought up vineyards from the Indus Valley. We've hired a bunch of homeless locals to stage a rally. We'll be planting a hearty vintage along the icy coast where the North Atlantic whispers off the ice encrusted shoreline, or so we'd like to boast. We've offered employment to the local population, although we're not entirely certain of the contingencies and requirements of the total operation. We've announced $1 million investment on paper, to be sure. But with the vineyards and the brewery, we're pleased to suggest that the local reindeer population will probably endure. The frozen tundra nearby will no doubt prove entirely fertile, and on the fallow, untested, albeit rock-strewn ground, or so we've been assured by our ag manager, charming gal named Myrtle, the proliferation of varieties of lichen add a picturesque splash of color to the varieties of gray landscape that we fully expect to double. We anticipate next December for our groundbreaking effort. We've rounded up some homeless migrants who launched the project. This bunch has impressed us all as quite clever. We'll be performing laser-guided drilling with brand new AI foremen, but the locals are undergoing formal cyber farming training, at least the few that's yet to be determined. The literate among them will make up the clerical staff. There's insurance forms to process and punch cards to load, so I'm not yet prepared to laugh. We'll be handing out hundreds to hungry passers-by. This can be easily explained. Pretty soon, my friend, you'll know. We plan to tell you by and by. We've been giving large bills to children and the wandering homeless. Yeah, that's true. They often find us enticing, and the work is quite exciting. Besides, many will be of voting age, or so we do construe. We imagine bountiful vineyards, the beachside we've been nourishing. We expect it will be flourishing, new hotels and a thriving tourist trade. And as they relax, they can enjoy a festive reindeer parade. Thank you. Thank you. And then on a far more serious note, we have these things that touch us in our lives that seem worthy of treatment and study. I turned at this point to broccoli, a vegetable that Frank Zappa might have called some sunny day. But here we go, a broccoli and ode. I love the tiny trees of old broccoli. I see old Gargantua, or perhaps Paul Bunyan, so substantua, devouring forests hand over hand, barely leaving anything but gritty sand. Broccoli and soup leaves me droop. And baked, I think, a dastardly mistake. But breaking those tiny branches into kindling makes me hungry, especially when the supply in the fridge is dwindling. And I will, on occasion, with a little persuasion, sprinkle some across the salad and sing out my praises in a ballad. But make mine steam, the very stuff of dreams, add a drizzle of salty butter or a pound of jeddars better. Send that broccoli my way on dusty road or main highway. Pass me another, please, won't you, brother? An ode to broccoli. Now, speaking of food, since we're running down that particular alleyway, I thought it was time to treat on a most heinous crime, the famous assault with sub sandwich that we know of in song and story. Not a club sandwich, not a wild man which sought destruction or further corruption or stain the bulletproof vest so Justin, unless tomatoes and French fried potatoes conspire with lettuce to mayonnaise this serious demeanor like a wiener for violence. This loafing meat dare not compete. Sleuthing officers, proper duty, barbecue or mesquite, and salted vinaigrette chips with the hazardous dips, French onion and more than Diet Coke, contains remains the remaining nomination. Let us pray. When threatened by a sandwich, confronted by a man which headline shout about it, sandwich thrower hurls sub at feds during DC crime crackdown is charged with felonious salt and pepper. Felonious assault. Oh, thou pickle packing partisan who had only shorts and a t shirt on. 50 brave officers assaulted the mischief miscreant who dissented with Mayo, and this hunted man, shackled and spackled with lettuce bits, left the officer peppered and assaulted, whose badge was so taunted by the tossed vegan sub. The arresting platoon of cops were there to do their duty with a sterner visage justly painted as painful as salade amer putti. The judge requested he who held the lettuce, was it yellow or spicy mustard, or was it mixed with custard? And there were there tomatoes involved. With this problem that can be solved without resort to clause, could the courthouse bailiff please hold this law? I'll pause here for a minute before we go on another sally. Any thoughts, reactions? I hope I saw a smile or two.
Hilarious. I love your rhymes. I mean, you got it all down pat. Just great to hear you.
Thanks. Thanks. You know, when I started performing publicly during the Vietnam War protest days, a wiser, older poet pulled me aside and said, "You know, Rick, rhyming's just not done anymore." And I said, "No, I understand." He said, "Yeah, but you'll never get famous. You'll never be widely known. You'll never be appreciated as long as you rhyme. I mean, it's so done." And I said, "You know, brother, I understand that. And if I was seeking fashion, if I was, aiming to be a popular poet, well, by God, I should take such sage advice." I said, "But the thing is, I write to please my muse. I write what I'm told. It's really not a negotiation, you know. I mean, yeah, I'll sit there and plow around in the old brain for a rhyme or two, but no, I follow what I'm told, and not quite automatic writing, but once I get the inspiration hitting, I follow it where it goes. I'm sure many of you do the same thing. I was told, I guess about a year ago, somebody pulled me aside and said, Rick, and this is one of those sage Boston types, said, Richard, in addition to rhyming, which, isn't done, you're so goddamn funny. Don't you know that funny poets aren't really, appreciated? You need to be sad. You need to be, like down and, talk about your pain and like the shit you've been through and when you were beaten. Oh my God, your horrible childhood. And I said, it's just not where I might go. There's enough bullshit out there. There's enough pain. There's enough, you know, if I can lighten the mood a little, if I can give someone a smile, man, that makes my day. It really does. So
Well,
that's
thank
kind
goodness
of
you
my
ignored
modus
them
op.
and stayed with your humor.
Thanks. Thanks. That's what I try to do. Okay. Now, a friend of mine, a charming young lady from Slovakia. We correspond occasionally, and she wrote me and said her nickname is Bunny. She said, Rick, I'm about to start a new company. And you write such crazy stuff. Could you come up with a storyline for my bunny concept? And I said, well, you want something specific? She said, no, you write such crazy stuff. Whatever you write will be fine. So I thought, bunnies. What can you say about a bunny? They're cute, they're fuzzy, geez. And I thought, okay, what's the most unusual thing you could come up with? So this is what I got. It's called The Bunny's Revenge in 3 parts. They decided they'd had enough. Fluffy and Butterball had barely coughed, felt they'd been pushed to the very edge. They'd had enough. They just couldn't pull that sledge. They couldn't take it anymore. The very next night would be a new moon, according to the well-documented scientific lore. If you could see through the gloom, and the senior weather rabbit had announced that it would be cloudy. So even the stars would be undercover. It really wasn't funny. They decided they would call a formal meeting a bunny barrage, a secret gathering of fuzzy bunnies, too big to hold in a rumpus room or even a triple-sized garage. All the senior council would be there, Bart and Barney Bunny, Barbara and Betty, and Brunhilde Bunny, too. And besides, because they care, and it was daycare also. The capybara research team would come, and if they could escape from the zoo, no doubt it would be fun. They would all be there. It wasn't funny, even if it cost great scads of money. There would be presentations with colorful exhibits created, after all, by the brainiest bunnies on the mall. They would catch those cats napping. This time, the kitties had pushed the bunnies way too far. In fact, they'd pushed anything except the car. There'd been a truce for years and years between the pussycats and the bunnies, and it was said by many, even the unsteady, that they were just kitties with long fuzzy ears. Yet, from time to time, the bunnies would capture a kitty and taunt them mercilessly, calling them names, teasing them with the choicest carrot nubbins relentlessly. These kitties really don't like carrots, but it was a matter of principle. The average kitty, although not liking carrots, even tender, sweet ones, if they were precious and gleaming and pretty, but if there was something the kitty saw and couldn't have it, well, they wanted it all the more. By golly, they wanted it more than just some old nonsense habit. But after the incident last week, the truth was as cold as a stolen pizza from last Wednesday. Last week, a couple of cats had cornered a bunny and wouldn't release it. And when he'd crossed the highway on his way to the movies, that's why he did it. The movie was groovy. Why, you might ask, did the bunny want to cross that 8-lane highway? Well, you might. But these mean-spirited kitty cats, one by the name of Vanilla and the other one who hailed from Manila, and one who answered to Mascara, born in the sandy neighborhood of the Sahara, had stopped and blocked and held him upside down. Because of that, the fuzzy bunny nearly popped. And then they proceeded to mesmerize, simonize, evangelize, and even carbonize that cute little fuzzy bunny. And after a dozen hypnotic passes, Barnaby Bunny sat straight up, took off his glasses, glared at them with that eerily hate, and then with a final glance, took a chance, looked around him, and with 8 lanes of traffic whizzing by, leapt into the sky, and using his huge floppy ears, flapped his way over the mountain to glory. And at least for now, that's my story, and part 1. War of the Bunnies Against the Kitties, part 2. Down the road, at the scientific corner where the Bunsen burner never sets, where the Erlenmeyer flask regrets and the barometric arc's authentic microscopic turmoil, Professor Bunny found it funny that the cats were allowed to prowl. And that can't be normal. They were given the freedom to roam the labs at night. But it was the bunnies who toiled through the lonely hours. It just wasn't right. Yes, it's true, the cats maintained and restricted rodents that might end up disturbing the papers of those big old brains that roamed the lab when the day returned, when the Bunsen burners gaily daily burn, with autoclave and magnetic stir, with dancing pipettes, petri dishes, and all the while listening to Tina Turner. We adjust our safety glasses to protect our eyes in case the kitty's claws collide. These midnight prowling pussycats would, without the slightest sound, surround the bunny cages, as silent as winging bats. They'd try to jimmy the locks, which give the scared bunnies 15 kinds of shocks. Jimmy the locks. Even in the clean room, you might find 16 stalking kitties with dinner on their mind, staring intently at the bunny cages, threatening violence in well-planned sequence of stages. 2 or 3 kitties might terrorize a bunny to open the cage. Was their plan, my honey? It would be bunnies ducking to avoid their claws, under her breath clutching. They tried to reach him with those dangerous claws. The senior research bunny who'd concerns because it wasn't funny. This much he discerned. He strode to the lab with chips that he grabbed with the breadboard he had and proceeded to gin up with the oscillator setup. It required the brain power he had without let up. His idea was for a device, you see, an electronic humbug to you and me, created a field where the kitties would have to yield and leave the bunnies to their lettuce. They couldn't come there, they just wouldn't get us. So the patient bunny scientist knew he could rely on this. He could protect the rabbits in their cages. Right now, they would never feel safe from the kittens' rages. If the kittens couldn't come near, an electric field would force them to yield, and the bunnies could relax and play in their labs again and feed on the monkey chow. Occasionally gab again, and the kittens, though pretty, had to give them their space. The kittens couldn't compete with that static field. They charged static, they'd have to yield the electronic buzz, cuz. And then War of the Kittens versus the Bunnies, Part 3. Professor Dr. Bunny, through his extensive tests that he's running, had finally found the precise approach that was proved the best. And all that with no coach, and inside profound. Right there on ground zero, his scientific acumen made him a hero. With his oscillators, frequency counters, and special displays, he finally sussed it out late one summer day. He detected the special native frequency that actually reduced a certain behavior's repeatancy. When the kitties, so well prepared and ready to pounce, had a bunny cornered, there would be no doubt. But as their purring reached a certain pitch, a frequency that was preliminary to a certain fractious tendency, he showed exactly. He was able right there on his data tables when they were in the final seconds just before their launch for lunch. Their purring reached a pitch otherwise untouched with a nearly silent, deadly earnesty. His testing revealed a hitherto concealed, bloodthirsty preparatory urgency, now revealed as if the surgeon hummed a certain frequency only before surgery. Under advanced and repeated testing, he discovered a way to terminate by arresting that impulse in its final moments with little fanfare, somehow avoid the broken bestoken tokens, and thus circumnavigate the potential bloody fate that, unless short-circuited, would seal a bunny's terminal fate. Hey, say, that was great. So repeatedly, Professor Dr. Blinky, he could halt the mayhem, so he offered special equipment to the bunnies in the lab and was able to save them. So the conspiracy-minded kittens were mad, and so the lab bunnies gave him an award because they thought he was fab. He kept it on his tippy-toppest, proudest shelf right there in his lab. So when I sent this to my friend over in Slovakia, she said, "This is perfect." I was so pleased. She liked it.
Well, thank you, Richard. That was a spectacular display of performance skills. In fact, makes me want to ask if you have any advice for people when it comes to performing poetry.
Well, actually, one of my adventures is I like to bring what I call Shakespeare parties. And what we do is we'll pick a Shakespeare play, and then instead of the whole casting thing, which I don't really care for because it allows for too many psychological games, what I like to do is do what I call blind casting. And I'll put up a grid of numbers and have people pick a number, and that number relates to a part in the play. So we get all kinds of unusual casting. Young people get old parts, old people get young parts, young, old, boy, girl. It all gets mixed together because I think all of us can play any role. And we've done probably almost a dozen now over the course of our 4 or 5 years in Zoomverse. Before that, I used to do it in real space, and I would invite friends to come over, bring a copy of the play, and bring a dish. So we'd have a potluck, but I can't invite my international poet friends for a potluck, so we have to just sort of do it on the Zoom, But it's a lot of fun. This year, I'm going to try, in addition to Shakespeare, I'm going to do a very unusual play called Rhinoceros. It's quite an unusual absurdist play. So we'll see how that goes. That's my plans for to do that in April, and we'll probably start our Shakespeare stuff in summer.
Thank you very much, Rich. And we better go to the second part of this program. So I say thank you once more as we stop the recording. Oh.